In the early hours of September 25th, 2016, one 24-year-old man, the same age as I am talking to you right now, made a mistake. That's kind of an understatement, all things considered, but that mistake changed everything for him, everyone around him, and how an otherwise untouchable and unbelievably likable and charismatic person would be viewed for the rest of time. But how did we get here? This is the end of the story I just showed you. So how is it possible for one screw-up to undermine someone that was universally revered before it? Jose Fernandez tried 4 times to defect from Cuba to the United States for a chance at a better life, and to pursue his dream of being a Major League Baseball player. The first 3 attempts to get to America resulted in arrests and prison time for a teenage Jose. The 4th was finally a success, especially after saving his mother from drowning during the trip by diving off the boat to save her. At 15 years old, Jose eventually made it to Tampa, Florida, and he immediately burst onto the scene as a superstar baseball pitcher. They didn't even know who he was when he showed up to his first high school tryout. Remember, he's barely even been in the country. He was laughed at for being there, and then he did so well that they couldn't even consider keeping him off the team. Then, Fernandez won 2 high school state championships as the team's ace pitcher, and was a first-round pick in the 2011 MLB draft. A Cuban immigrant who came to adopt Florida as his home was now the top draft pick of the biggest Cuban city in America, Miami, Florida. An easy recipe for being a star in the community, if he just held up his end of the bargain. And you want to know something? He'd have the same immediate and unexpected impact on the Miami Marlins as he did his Tampa high school. Under 2 years after he was drafted, the Marlins thought Jose was so impressive as a 20-year-old that they called him up to the big leagues without having thrown 1 pitch in either of the top 2 levels of the minors. He started their 6th game of the 2013 season, making his MLB debut at Citi Field in New York. Fernandez was an advanced minor league pitcher for sure, maybe the best minor league pitcher, but he was 20. He was in high school, this time 2 years ago, facing kids who were worried about their science test the next morning. He's going to face David Wright now in his first game. The Marlins were thinking both in terms of his ability and that recipe for success in the community. They wanted a PR win. The team just sold off all their star veteran players 1 year after opening a brand new ballpark in Little Havana, and using taxpayer money to do it, then promising a title, now gearing up for an 100-loss season the next year. The Marlins were hoping Fernandez would just not be a joke, and be an easily likable young Cuban star in a Cuban-dominated community that loves baseball. What they got was totally beyond their wildest expectations.
And a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. Here's the 0-2 pitch. We'll pull the express. 97 miles an hour. 1-2 coming. Oof. When he has 2 strikes, 1-2. Breaking ball, struck him out. Breaking ball, ground ball. Fernandez up to get it. Gathers himself and throws a BB over to. Got him. Strikeout of Bird.
So he has now established a new club record by a rookie.
Fernandez dominated in his first game, and then he dominated his first season in the majors. He was an all-star. He gave up the fewest hits per inning of any qualified pitcher in the league. He was racking up strikeouts and preventing opponents from scoring. In fact, on top of being the toughest pitcher to string hits against in the NL, he also led the league in strikeout rate on a per-inning basis too. He was 20 years old, and he finished top 3 in the voting for being named the best pitcher in the National League that season. The only 2 guys ahead of him are the best left-handed pitcher of a generation and a 200-win possible future Hall of Famer. Next up behind these 2, who were 2 of the very best pitchers of this decade, by the way, was Jose Fernandez, at the age of being a college sophomore. It wasn't just that he was really good. It was how he went about his business in being really good. Jose was always happy. It was so easy to just dig up random clips of him smiling his way through being on a team that finished 62-100 on the season. He was a goofball who loved having fun on the field. He didn't even care if you didn't like him having fun either. He was going to stand on his principles and enjoy himself. He regularly risked his life to be in the US of A and play this game for a living. He wasn't going to let anybody tell him not to have as much fun as he could for achieving his dream. And then heartwarming stories started to roll in of him being reunited with his grandmother after leaving Cuba, who he called the love of his life, after this time finally making it as a big leaguer.
Oh. Oh boy. Oh my God.
So the Marlins, maybe by accident, landed a smash hit of a star for their team, their fans, and their city. And then after pitching 8 games in his second season, he got hurt and needed major elbow surgery that was going to keep him off the field for about 14 months. He was unbelievable his rookie year. He showed signs he was ramping up to be even better in year 2. And then he was taken away from the team and its fans. Now, full disclosure, Marlins home games have a bit of a bad reputation in baseball. Fans and players often both point out how seemingly quiet and dead home games in Miami have been for what's now over a decade's worth of seasons. But things were different on days Jose Fernandez pitched.
So his night ends on a strikeout.
People showed up, and there was a much different energy in the building on those days. If you needed any proof, listen to how much this crowd roared for him in his first game back from injury in 2015.
And his first pitch is a fastball for a strike. 94 miles an hour. He got him, fastball.
Fernandez pitched okay in his first game back. 6 innings, 3 runs, 6 strikeouts. His day was seeming like it was going to end right there. But a goofy 22-year-old who loves being a baseball player more than maybe anyone else in the league at this time is not going to take kindly to having a special welcome back game end just yet. So luckily for him, his spot to bat in the lineup is coming up first in the bottom of the 6th. Before his manager can give him the old pat on the back and thank you for a good day's work but you're done now talk, Jose grabs his bat and hides out in the on-deck circle, hoping he can hit before getting yanked from this game. That's at least how the Marlins TV broadcast is presenting it.
With the possibility he might be lifted after 81 pitches, this was Fernandez coming into the dugout.
He didn't even look at Dan Jennings. I want to get in the on-deck circle before they have time to talk things over.
And because this man is already on a heater for proving he's an extremely charismatic showman to the Miami crowd, he does this to cap off his day.
Fernandez, left field, that's deep, that is gone! You gotta be kidding me! Welcome back!
Because he's Jose Fernandez, he was still just as amazing after coming back from injury. He was an all-star again in 2016, and maybe too much continued to prove how light and fun the game of baseball was to him, saying he was going to treat the game as a chance to smile and pay tribute to a legend, even when losing could have cost his somehow in playoff contention at midseason Marlins home field in the World Series. Fernandez didn't do it though, and still had fun. He had the second best season of his career in 2016, reaching a new career high in innings and passing 250 strikeouts, with the MLB lead in strikeouts per inning too. So he was mowing them down more than anybody else on a per batter basis. And the season was capped off for him with 8 outstanding shutout innings with 3 hits allowed, 12 strikeouts, and no walks, at home in Miami against the first place Washington Nationals. What he called the best game of his career afterwards. September 20th, 2016 was, in his mind, the peak of the journey. He risked everything for this opportunity time and time again, and now he's a star in a community that loves him, and he loves them right back. Having the best game of your career after all of that has to be an unbelievable emotional high, which should illustrate the shock of what happened 5 days later.
Several hours ago, it was confirmed that 24-year-old Jose Fernandez, the ace of the Marlins and one of the best pitchers in the sport, was killed in a boating accident in the early hours of this morning.
Fernandez died this weekend after a boat he was a passenger in crashed into the rocks in Miami.
It is with the deepest sorrow that I, together with my family and the entire Marlins organization, mourn the tragic loss of Jose Fernandez. Sadly, the brightest lights are often the ones that extinguish the fastest.
Overnight, baseball suffered an unimaginable loss. His incredible talent was matched only by his joy and passion for baseball and life. Our hearts ache for a life cut short and a loss that will be felt and remembered for countless years ahead.
You recognize that how precious life is and how taking things for granted is a fool man's game.
It's tough to describe how much this news rocked baseball at this moment. It shook everyone to their core, myself included. Jose Fernandez, one of the brightest stars a sport, a town, and the American dream had, was taken from us at 24 years old, which feels disgustingly weird to say out loud as a 24-year-old. The outpour of empathy and heartbreak was universal, all over baseball, all over South Florida, all over the world even. People were in complete shock that someone like Jose Fernandez could no longer be with us in the blink of an eye. Like, it never even crosses your mind that this could be true. It just felt like there was no way. Someone got the story wrong. It was someone else with the same name. It was media looking for clicks. No, it was real. And to somehow make the story even more crushing, out Jose's girlfriend was pregnant with his first child at this time. But where it really hit everyone was when the Marlins would go on to play their next game, one day after news of the tragedy broke.
I don't know how they're going to do it, but the Miami Marlins are going to play a baseball game against the Mets tonight. I was especially struck by the poignancy of the national anthem, a song we hear every day. But for a young man who risked everything to be a part of this country, it rang especially true today.
D. Gordon steps up to the plate to lead off for the Marlins. He first stands in the other batter's box as a tribute to his friend, Jose Fernandez. And then, stepping in to hit, wearing Fernandez's name and number on his back.
Gordon to right. It's deep. And it's gone! D. Gordon has hit it out. And the Marlins have a 1-0 lead.
This was his only home run of the entire season. Talk immediately sprouted from the top of the Marlins pyramid about cementing Jose's place in history forever. Murals all over Miami were started just by ordinary citizens, but the team hadn't taken any formal action yet. So naturally, and understandably, the focus shifted to talking about how a statue outside the stadium and retiring his number could be in the cards. And it wasn't just the team. The city of Miami was discussing naming streets after Jose and placing tribute plaques all over the city, making sure generations of the future understood the beacon of hope and fun Jose Fernandez represented before he was taken from us too soon. And then the story changed. Roughly 6 months after Jose passed away, official reports were made public that Jose was in fact the driver of the boat that crashed. He was in fact legally drunk, and he did in fact have cocaine in his system while driving a boat 65 miles an hour. If Jose Fernandez had survived the accident, he would have likely received considerable prison time and was liable for at least 4 major crimes. Jose Fernandez was no longer the gone-too-soon happy-go-lucky icon taken by tragedy. Jose Fernandez became a man who recklessly got himself and 2 other passengers taken from us by being stupid and being irresponsible enough to be in this situation. At least that's how the public saw it. His estate was sued for $2 million by the families of the other crash victims. The outpour of love and desire to immortalize Jose completely and abruptly stopped once these reports came out. He was no longer the sympathetic hero. He was an irresponsible criminal who died before he could be held accountable. That was the narrative that took hold. So, public opinion took to holding him accountable retroactively, and his name started to get dragged through the mud in a way you never could have expected on September 25th, 2016. And to some extent, That's what you get for making so foolish and so costly a mistake that takes the lives of 3 people, including yourself. It's difficult to memorialize someone who would not have been viewed the same way ever again if they hadn't been taken in the process. It's such a horrible turn for the story here. In a way, it bothers you more than it would if he was not connected to any crimes during the situation. So, no. There were not any additional major tributes from what had already taken place. Bryce Harper wore cleats to honor Jose in the 2017 All-Star Game in Miami, and that's among the last formal tributes I can remember seeing for Fernandez. The retired number never came, the statue never came, the citywide memorials never came, and to an extent, that's not all his legacy has suffered. I believe that whether it was intentional or not, Jose Fernandez has kind of been erased from history. Outside of die-hard Marlins fans or Marlins media members, you rarely see people mention him at all anymore. Very few, if any, highlights posted. Very few, if any, 10 years ago today, Jose Fernandez did this kind of posts. For a guy who it looked like was about to go down celebrated forever, there's very little recent paper trail out there of acknowledgement outside of the people who cared about him the most. Is that the price you might have to pay for the consequences of your actions? Sure, but perception, and thus how he's treated in history, have changed as the story of that night on the water became more complicated and less sympathetic towards Jose. And here's the thing I want to say about that. I'm not 100% sure the punishment fits the crime here. I'm not sure that total erasure from everyone's minds is fair, especially as time passes. Fernandez was a much more likable figure in life whose entire story before that one night was as preservable as you could get. He just happened to pay the ultimate price for that one mistake, and it affected other people around him. Something he does deserve to be held accountable for. But if we're being honest with ourselves, there are other ball players and people in society who have committed much more harmful, disgusting, and premeditated acts that get far more romanticized to this day. Fernandez does not deserve to be totally cast aside as a pariah compared to some of the other past players with skeletons. Those who get those skeletons overlooked, and those who do not. It is perfectly reasonable and okay for both things to be true in this instance. You can say Fernandez made an incredibly stupid decision and doesn't deserve to be as revered over it, and he has to be a cautionary tale for what can happen if you mix drugs and alcohol and decide driving afterwards is a good idea. You also can remember the good he brought to millions of people before this. I don't think that goes away over the mistake that came after it. That still happened. It doesn't go away because of one mistake that came after it. You do feel the loss to this day in Miami. It's very rare to see home games for the Marlins with crowd pops as loud as they would be for Jose Fernandez. That itself is a tangible impact of what this man left behind and took with him in death. It's complicated. It really is. And very difficult to talk about. This topic gets a whole lot sadder, a whole lot earlier than a lot of what we talk about here. Stark Raving Sports exists to make sports fun and light for everyone. Jose Fernandez symbolized that for years, until he made one unbelievably dumb mistake that cost him that reputation. Whether or not that's entirely fair is now up to you, and we will have to see how baseball and time choose to remember a man the sport has since fallen out of love with.